is official. Please welcome Eric and Julia Ruwald. Thank you. Give it up. You guys can do better than this. The first Q&A. Maybe even a standing O.
Has anyone here seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? Did anybody catch a little snippet of a song? I stuck around for the final credit roll, and there it says, theme song for X-Men 97, which gives me hope that musically, the new series that's coming out next November,
Really?
in the fall, as X-Men 97, will...
Because that wasn't...
Let me pop the mics down just a little bit for you guys. They're a little hot.
Yeah, because that wasn't a done deal necessarily when they were producing the new show. There were rights all over the place. I think the secondary person had rights to the music, so it was a negotiation for them. Obviously, you can't do the new show without that song, but
If you want to.
the guy selling it knew the same thing, so I'm sure it was a hefty price.
So I gotta say, you guys worked for a lot of different animation houses, from what, Disney to Hanna-Barbera. How do the animation houses differ as far as like what they expect, the work atmosphere? Is there a radical difference?
Night and day between, the Steelers and a middle school team. I mean, Disney was this where we met was this immense company, and they flooded the building with all sorts of really talented folks. And it was a beautiful place to work for a couple of years, because there were like 100 artists and writers all on the same floor, kind of like a fraternity or sorority, and cranking out the Disney Afternoon. They just suddenly decided, Disney hadn't really been on TV in the late 80s, and then 86 or so, they decided, well, Hanna-Barbera is making all the money, we need to horn in on this, and they just said, let's build a department. And that's how I got swept up in it. I was in Hanna-Barbera at the time for about a year, and Buddy, a dear friend at Disney named Tad Stones, hired each of us. It was Chippendale's Rescue Rangers time, so that's who I got hired to write on. And if you guys have seen the new movie, which we both liked a great deal.
The new Chippendale Rescue Rangers movie.
Tad's voice is in a couple of the episodes, because he was our boss. But yeah, it's such a different world. Some of them are little tiny companies that maybe have 15 employees and just really need some scripts from you, and some of them are these massive international conglomerates. And X-Men was kind of in the middle. It was a bunch of pretty medium-sized players kind of patched together, and it's hard to imagine now, but at the time, nobody really thought it was going to be successful. They only hired us for one season, and they let us all go after we'd written the first season, because they just thought, nobody's going to watch Marvel superheroes on television.
All credit to a woman named Margaret Lesh, who had been recently installed as the president of a brand new network for Fox Kids. And she'd been working at Marvel previous to that, Marvel Productions, and she had complete faith in X-Men, but couldn't give it away to any of the major networks back then. Then she becomes the head of Fox Kids and says, we're doing Batman, we're doing X-Men. And the difference between Warner Brothers' smooth operating machine versus the efforts to get good old X-Men together are pretty stark.
It's hard to remember. Marvel had never made a movie before. They tried a few TV, cartoons that didn't quite come together, and they were a couple of years away from bankruptcy. They went bankrupt in '96 because they kind of overextended themselves. They were just a comic book company in Manhattan, and as we said, just could not sell a show to Hollywood. Hollywood just kind of didn't get this nerd thing. They didn't know where that was coming from. But Margaret believed in it to the point where her boss looked at our first X-Men script. I guess the senior vice president of Fox looked down and said, I don't think I get this at all, Margaret. You sure you want to do this show? And she said, yeah. I said, well, and if it fails, you're fired. She said, she just imagined that it would be like the best animated show she'd ever been involved in. And she'd been in animation 20 years. She'd done all sorts of major shows at Hanna-Barbera, other places, Transformers, Muppet Babies. I mean, she had lots and lots and lots of hits, but nothing that she pitched with Marvel with Stan Lee ever got purchased. So she had 10 years of frustration built up, and that's why she really wanted this one to go right.
And I just want to jump in and talk about 30 years ago, money. Money will always play the crucial role in getting a show going or chopping the show down at its knees. But as I was a writer on the first season, we were all let go because there was no assumption there'd be a second season. Luckily, the show was a big hit out of the gate, and immediately you get the call, oh, yay, we're going to do another season. And the writers get a call, yay, they signed us up for another season, but they're going to pay you $500 less. What?
That wasn't the usual Hollywood thing. Usually, oh, there's a hit, the friends all get their salaries doubled. It was absolutely opposite. This incredibly clever and incredibly rich man named Haim Saban is very rich for decisions like this. He was one of the partners in the show, and he was thrilled that he was about to make a bunch of money off of it. But he looked around and he said, look, we have a #1 hit. Now, all the animation writers in town are going to want to write for this. So if the 7 guys that worked on the first season don't like the pay cut, I got 70 more standing outside the door that would love to be on your show. So, sorry guys. I kicked in a little for the writers to kind of make up for it that first season, but then it showed you we weren't in the executive suite. We weren't in first class when we were making the show. It was a real kind of garage band effort, is the way our executive put it. He said Batman is cool jazz, and X-Men is a garage band. And that's just the way we had to get into it. The upside of that was we got to write the stories we wanted without really any interference from anybody. It was not micromanaged because they didn't think it was going to be a big deal. So, write your X-Men stories. And that was wonderful. I mean, that was a real gift.
And we were told, do not write down the kids on this show. You write the show like you're writing in prime time, 1 hour long, detective procedural, whatever, but you're writing for grown-ups. Don't dumb it down. And that, I think, is one of the things that has, like why we're still talking about the show 30 years later, that really heavy topics got to be addressed, but in a way that was a Saturday morning cartoon, but there were a lot of college students watching it at the time. There were a lot of families watching it together with their kids. It hit all the demographics in a way that no one expected.
In that first season, do you think there's like a pivotal episode that really pushed it over the top?
Yeah, it was a funny thing. There was animation, especially back then, when all these it was all hand painted and animated. They would hand paint 700,000-800,000 cells per episode, and have to animate one at a time. It's a massively labor intensive job there. Where were we going with this?
The one episode was pivotal.
Yeah. And so, by chance, in the teething problems of getting a crew together and getting a new show going, the stuff was coming back terrible. And we were pulling our hair out. So, the animation isn't working, and we haven't gotten the voices right yet. And everything that could possibly not quite be going right was going wrong. We all thought, well, we're all doomed. But Margaret, in her brilliance, said, look, you're scheduled to start September, first week of September. Everything, like when you were kids, everything started in September. It's fall TV schedule. Well, instead, we're going to hold off till January. We're going to spend 4 months getting the show right. And in doing that, she said, but we've got everybody up for the show. We're going to have a couple sneak previews of the actual show that we have ready, and that was Night of the Sentinels 1 and 2. So they played Night of the Sentinels on Halloween, they played Night of the Sentinels on Thanksgiving, they played Night of the Sentinels when it premiered in January 8th, so by the time it got going, there's some frustrated fans out there wondering, are there any other episodes? But it's one that really sticks with me because there's nothing harder than a pilot story, the first story you do in a show, to introduce the characters, because that's its own craft, and tell a fun story at the same time. It's really difficult, and Mark Edens, who's been a buddy of mine since college in Tennessee, and I really worked on that story. We wanted to jam so much into it that we literally went to the art people and they said, look, what you've given us is an hour. We need this down to 40 minutes. And so what you saw was a really quick first episode. But I think other stories may be stronger, but I think Night of the Sentinels is the most satisfying to us on the writing side because we got people interested in what a mutant was. It's hard to imagine now, but nobody in America, 10% of America knew what the X-Men were or what a mutant might be. So the kids and the adults that were tuning in every Saturday, we had to make sure that the stories gently reminded everybody of that and continued to reference their powers, reference their backgrounds, and just introducing this whole new world of X-Men mutancy was something that we had to take great care with, and I think the opening pilot did it the best.
And with Margaret and Will Mineo, who is on the art side, as Will and Larry Houston, a lot of the artists grew up with the X-Men. They were the crazed X-Men geeks. On the writing side, we weren't. We were learning it as we ran along here. But one of the things that Will Mineo was insistent upon was that comic books are continuous, that you pick one up, you get to the end, oh, to be continued to next week. And he really wanted to try and create that feeling with X-Men, which meant sequential storytelling, which is great if every episode comes back from overseas and it's happy news and we can air it. But it was episode 1 and 2 came back, okay, minor fixes. 3 was a disaster, but 4 was kind of okay. The problem was you couldn't run 1 and 2, then 4, then 3, and so that first year, in the second season, that same kind of storytelling, episodic approach, but a big change on that. If any of you remember Savage Land.
Yeah, they had so many production problems the first season, they said, can you try not to have everything in order again? And if we get a show back that's bad, we'd like to be able to hold it off for a month and fix it and have shows be more interchangeable. And we said, okay, well, it's disappointing. But we thought, aha, there's a way to make it look connected. So the second season, we had a two-parter to start that ends up with Professor Xavier and Magneto going to the Savage Land. Then we had 9 independent episodes, which could be kind of intermingled however you wanted them. And then a two-parter at the end that saved Xavier and Magneto from Savage Land. But during those 9 in the middle, we went to the Savage Land for 30 seconds for a little scene that was actually in progression about them being endangered and saved and endangered and saved or whatever. And we animated that first. So that was in order. That kind of spine of that season 2 was in order. And then the other ones that we did, if one became a problem and we thought it was episode 18, we could move it up to episode 23 if we wanted to, and it made it more flexible for the people producing it.
Just one of the most egregious problem in terms of telling the stories on X-Men was it Phoenix Saga, where Jean...
Oh, that beware. It's in the right order now, but if you've been trying to watch on Disney Plus for a while, what happened was we did this huge 5-part episode with the Phoenix, and Jean sacrifices herself heroically, flies into the sun, and she's dead. Okay, and the next episode, which was supposed to follow,
called No Mutant is an Island,
has the X-Men grieving and having a memorial service for her, and has her beloved Scott being so upset that he leaves the X-Men. I cannot be part of this anymore. I've lost Jean forever. Blah, blah. And by the end of the episode, they find her somewhere, and she's alive. Oh, how wonderful. Well, that episode was badly animated and not aired for a year and a half. So for the poor people watching it, and they kept it in this order on Disney Plus for some reason. You're watching along, you're watching episodes 31 through 34, and Jean's dead, and then suddenly Jean's back. There's no explanation, no how'd she get out of it. Just, oh, so sorry, but Jean's back. So they finally, we called Disney a couple times, and they now have put it in the correct order. And if you're curious, we've got a couple books about the show, and they have the right order for how they were written.
But then when the episode finally came back, and it was viewable, it got aired like a year and a half, 2 years later, with no context. It's just suddenly Scott is putting the X-Men because Jean's gone. Well, where did she go? She was in the last episode, you know. Then so those kinds of problems, yeah.
Yeah, but you guys were really nice about making allowances as fans.
And there was no social media.
Oh, yeah. No internet while we were making this. When we send stuff to, when we want to hear the voices from Toronto where they recorded, we'd get sent an audio cassette, snail mail, to listen to. That's how high tone. But yeah, no internet, no email. And, so but the nice part was, so no people wondering how you were ruining the show.
So we'll get to questions from the audience. I just have 2 quick ones. Did Stan Lee ever pop in and say hey?
Stan Lee popped in early. Stan was 69 for 30 years, so Stan was 69 at the time and incredibly more energy than any of us. And Stan wanted to be part of everything and anything he could possibly be part of. And unfortunately, Stan's connection with the X-Men was from 1963 when they were extraordinary teenagers, which, to look at Wolverine and say, oh, he's an extraordinary teenager. It was a very different, it was like Pat Boone versus Nirvana. It was really a different tone to the X-Men, and he really didn't know the new team. I don't know if you guys know, but the original X-Men comics actually failed. It went from 1963 to 1970, and they stopped making new ones because the sales weren't good. They would make reprints for 4 or 5 years and sell them places. And then they got the idea, let's reintroduce them, but we need to fix them, make them older, more intense, and make them international. The original X-Men were just like 6 American 18-year-olds that basically had talked the same. The new X-Men starting in 1995 with Glenn Wein and reintroducing them had Wolverine from Canada, Colossus from Russia, Nightcrawler from Germany, Storm from Africa, and they said, look, make it a United Nations of X-Men. And so it was a whole new team and a whole new feel to it, a much more adult feel to it. And Stan didn't quite really get that. So when he was trying to be an advisor, and in Stan's case, that tended to mean taking over everything. But he tried to be an advisor on our show, and it just never fit. I mean, we ended up being friends, and we ended up working on half a dozen other things together afterwards. But I had the horrifying responsibility as a young writer in television going to my bosses and saying, I just have to say no to Stan, nothing fits. He's wanting to tell a different story. And those were not gentle meetings. And it ended up, he obviously ended up happy with what we did with the show, but it was an awkward partnership there for that first season. Once it was successful, obviously everybody just got on the same page. But until the first, it takes 4 or 5 months to animate stuff, until the first show started coming back, not only Stan, but a number of people were second-guessing our decision to make the show as adult and intense and dramatic as we made it. They would have liked something younger and funnier.
And one more question before we get to you guys. About the books, what's going on with those?
Okay, 2 of them. One of them is The first book was called Previously on X-Men, which you guys all know from watching the show 1,000 times. And this is a book I interviewed, she talked me into it. I interviewed all the cast and the crew and the artists and the writers, the executives, everybody that had anything to do with putting the show together. And so it's an oral history. There's no color artwork they made it at the time. Marvel didn't even have quite the rights to all of that yet, so we just did the book on our own, and this is a personal history for dense history of the behind the scenes things that went into putting the show together, like getting Stan mad at me, that sort of thing. And the second one was a wonderful surprise. Marvel liked this and said, look, we've got the rights back. We've got the rights to all the artwork now. We know we're still in contact with a lot of the original artists from the show. Like the cover back and front is done by Larry Houston and Rick Hobart, who had artists on the show itself. And so we dug through and found all sorts of original cells and all the character designs for all the episodes. And this is much more just jam-packed, 4 pounds of images and showing how you put a hand-painted animated show together. So this one's much more about what the people were doing. This is showing you what they were doing. So it's, and we've got copies of each of them at our table.
I was just going to ask, where can someone get something like that?
And if we run out, we can give you an email card, and we're happy to send you one through the mail.
You'll sign those too.
But we'll sign these. We'll personally sign these either here, or as I say, if we run out here, we can leave your snail mail address and a Venmo or something, and we'll get you a personally signed one sent to you.
Okay, you guys got questions? Raise your hand. Here we go. Sideshow Dan, right down front.
Hello. So in Multiverse of Madness, a Professor X showed up. Do you think that this was the same Professor X from the animated series?
When I saw the trailer and I saw the yellow cover and I saw the green suit and I saw the hand and then I heard the music cue, oh my God, my heart was skipping beats. But I don't know if that's how they're going to try and do it. I don't know.
Well, if not, they're nasty teases. Because Professor X never was dressed like that, and his hover chair never looked like that anywhere except in our show. So the reason that they made it look that way was specifically for that. And they teased that in the trailer, and we all reacted to it online. And we got a note from us, guys, we're not sure that's from the animated series. So they're being coy. It's absolutely the guy from the animated series.
Awesome. And we have a question right down there, if you want to get that side of the room. And I'll get the one over here next.
Which character did you really hate to write about?
Well, that's a fun spin.
I was always the other one. Who's your favorite X-Men to write? Most of them were a lot of fun.
Okay, not to throw him in the bus, but Cyclops was more challenging to write for because he was sort of the moral compass. He had a lot of responsibilities on himself versus Wolverine. I'm just, I'll go slash whatever I need to slash. But in keeping Cyclops an interesting character that you could still care for, writing for him was not as easy as writing for some of the others. I'll say that.
Yeah, Cyclops and Jean probably. I mean, they were both so responsible. Xavier was just this living, breathing, intense, idealistic incarnation of his belief in how mutants fit in the world. And it was, words poured out of him. And Wolverine had something, the first nasty thing you could imagine to say if he sees a problem, he just will blurt it out, and that's easy, fun, colorful writing. And Beast was so articulate and obscure in his literary references. That's great fun as well. I think Jubilee might have been hardest for me, just because we were all around 30. All the X-Men we felt in the room were around 30. Xavier's in his 50s. But Jubilee was a 13-year-old girl. And to make her a full member of the group and still sound and feel and emote like a 13-year-old girl was probably the most challenging of the group for me. Oh, the villains were easy. The villains were fun.
And, okay.
I was just going to say, quick side note, because there's a point here. The point is, I grew up on reruns of the original Star Trek series as a young, lonely geek girl in Texas. And apparently you did the same thing that is a
That in Tennessee.
geek boy in Tennessee. When we come out to California, we eventually meet. It's like, oh, you like Star Trek? You know, so it's kind of teasing each other. Well, which episode was it? So that happened. Then we found out, and unfortunately, we didn't find out until after he had actually passed. But the very first Klingon in the live-action X-Men series, a fellow named
None of the Klingon in Star Trek.
Star Trek. A fellow named John Colicos. I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sure, but John Colicos was the first Klingon ever. And we found out after the fact that he was our Apocalypse. He was that.
We got to write 14 episodes for the first Klingon. For the Klingon commander. And it's just, we seriously geeked out when we discovered that.
Oh my God! Yeah. So, and Apocalypse was a hoot to write for.
All the writers loved writing for Apocalypse.
And question right down the middle.
So during the run of the series, there was a lot of Easter eggs and cameos of other Marvel characters, someone off camera, or in like Rogue's Tale and Miss Marvel in her background, and Captain America and Old Soldiers. So I know there's probably someone from Marvel hiding out here, so you have to, of course, watch what you say. But as supervising producers on X-Men 97, they're hopefully taking some of your original ideas if you had continued. So hypothetically speaking, now that you have the Marvel toy box, would you have any interest, or would you nudge the team maybe doing something with Fantastic Four and Avengers like Onslaught for a future season?
Interesting. I'm good. She's afraid I'm going to say something out of school, which I do too often. But a two-part answer to your question. The hardest thing for me in supervising the 76 stories, where there were so many characters in the X-Men universe already. Forget about the rest of the MCU, which was not part of us. And they're only 22-minute stories. Just giving a few minutes and giving a little depth and giving a little backstory, giving a little character to each of those dozens of people. All of whom have fans, and we could all see places we could put them in the various stories, was a bit overwhelming. And if you look as the series progresses, I tended to cut the X-Men into groups of 2 or 3 so they could have an adventure with like 1 or 2 other people. And so it wasn't 8 X-Men coming to the room and there are 8 bad guys and they're all talking to each other. You can't make head and tail of everybody. So one of the greatest challenges for me was there were way too many characters to deal with just in the X-Men, 30 years of X-Men comics. The idea of hoping to add another chaotic, massive group, or 2 or 3, to this mix was so out of my mind, you can't imagine it. So that was a tough thing to come. Now, the people that are doing the new show grew up on all of this. They know all the X-Men people. They know all the characters from them. Kevin Feige must have a staff of 1,000 reminding him which characters he's got going where. These new folks care more about bringing more and more and more of these characters into stories. So I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine they will be bringing in new people, and there'll be a broader group of people than we use on our show.
Maybe.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah.
Okay, let's get a few more questions right down front.
Yeah, just kind of, you mentioned you had time with Hanna-Barbera and some of the other ones. Like, who did you do for Hanna-Barbera?
Hanna-Barbera, I got my start in January 1985. For the longest time in Hollywood, first of all, there were theatrical cartoons like Bugs Bunny cartoons that we all grew up on, and those were wonderful. And then in the mid-50s, television happened, and people started realizing, oh, we could make cartoons and have them on Saturday morning, and they were much cheaper, like Rough and Ready or something. If you look at Rough and Ready or Bullwinkle, are really simply animated and really cheaply produced. And because they needed that many more. And Warner's would only maybe make 6 or 8 theatrical cartoons a year, and they put a lot of money into them. When they started being cartoons for TV, they'd be cranking out. You might do 26 in a year or something. With the Smurfs, more. At Hanna-Barbera, suddenly they got the idea in the whole business, and Hanna-Barbera was the biggest employer, that you could show cartoons in the afternoon from Monday through Friday after school. And so instead of ordering 13 cartoons, which is what you would do if it was on Saturday morning, they'd order 65 at a time, at a batch. And that's when things, and the people that put the money up for that were the toy companies. So you ended up with things like Transformers and He-Man being the push in the mid-'80s to suddenly go from this many cartoons produced to this many. And that's when I got hired, because my neighbor said, oh, they're hiring people on. They suddenly got a huge order for shows. And it happened that the cartoon I was put on for Hanna-Barbera was a Transformers competitor called Challenge of the GoBots, which was transforming vehicles having adventures in space. And so I did 6 GoBots, and that was my introduction to animation. It just took off from there. I had a hand in half a dozen other things at Hanna-Barbera, but including an unfortunate thing called Popeye and Son, where the network didn't want Popeye and Pluto to ever fight at all, and didn't want Popeye's son to look at all like him. He looked like Archie, so he had to wonder what's going on with olive oil. So Hanna-Barbera for about a year, and then I went over to Disney.
But you went over something, and I just want to emphasize that to anybody here in the room. When they had an open call at Hanna-Barbera, your neighbor knew to suggest that to you, because your neighbor knew you were trying to break into the writing business. And so if you got a passion, let everyone around you know, because you never know. Same thing for me. A friend invited me on a softball league, which I don't play, but I tried. And that season, I met a gal who said, "Oh, you should come over to Disney, and you can pitch some shows there." I wish I could explain to you how, oh no, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then you'll end up here. There are no fast rules. But letting people around you know what you're trying to do can be helpful, because you never know where it's going to come from.
So let's keep around that question. I actually want to ask how you got into animation writing. Were you writing film scripts? Were you writing, what brought you to that?
What got me to it was coming out to Los Angeles from Texas, and I teased him, 10-year overnight success. It took me 10 years once I was in LA to get writing samples of anything. I would have been happy writing for anybody for anything. The fact that the animation job for Disney was the first thing that got me in, I was fine with that. It was a learning curve to write for animations.
I was going to say,
yeah.
You probably have like an unlimited palette of ideas for animation. It just sounds like there's nothing holding you back.
And then after that, entering the freelance universe, where you're always out there hustling for the next gig. That seems to be the case in all of these stories. But got into animation, was very happy there, and have written live action since, and have enjoyed that tremendously too. It's the challenge of getting that first opportunity.
Yeah, it wasn't a plan for me either. I moved out to Hollywood because I love movies, I love storytelling, And it just happened that the first, and I'd written stacks and stacks of scripts, hoping to sell like everybody else does, the thousands of scripts that get written for every one that ever gets produced. And so my neighbor said, could I show one to my boss at Hanna-Barbera because they're hiring? And that was it. My friends teased me, if it had been a sitcom writer that was my neighbor, it would have been like, I would have been 40 years in sitcoms. If it were our drama writer living with me, that's what I'd be doing. It was the first door that opened. And we seem to fit it well. There's a little more filmmaking that goes on in animation writing. You have to be more visual, and that suited both of us. But it was, in either case, it was just like the first door that opened was animation, and we ran with it.
So when you write for animation, do you put like any kind of hints or subtext or anything with the dialogue as what might be going on? I know there's blocking, this and that. Do you actually get involved with things like that go directly to the animators?
Absolutely. It's a live action script is much shorter than an animated script for the same length of time, because you're handing this thing off to a bunch of people who are going to start drawing it, and they all need to have someone as much of a similar understanding of what's going on the page. You have to cover every line of dialogue with action. You have to say, who's looking over whose shoulder? What is he trying to climb the ladder? Everything that is happening in a scene, you have to write it down.
Is he angry when he's saying it? Is he confused when he's saying it? And there's such a wide range of production we're talking about at places like Disney and Warner's. They have they give you all sorts of time and all sorts of budget and all sorts of really talented people everywhere. And perhaps if you're the writer, even you could follow from the very beginning through the recording session, through the storyboards, when the animation comes back. Not 8 out of 10 jobs in animation in Hollywood are very segmented. You're a writer, you write a script. Here's a script. That gets handed to the storyboard guy. Now you're on to the next script. You're never going to see that again. You're never going to hear that again. The storyboard guy writes it out. If you're the supervising writer, you'll see it, make sure that the storyboard guy drew what you were imagining.
So you never really put any kind of like little sketch.
Oh, no, we put, Wolverine lowers his head in grief as he whispers, to the winds, this one's for you, more. You put all that in there, and it makes our scripts very long because we're not there to make sure in a much bigger budgeted project, a supervising producer might be there. You might not have put it on the paper, but you might not, if you were there to say, oh, no, you need to be more grief-filled here. You're there in person. But since ours is very much an assembly line thing, we want to make sure that every single thing that we thought or imagined or felt about that moment is written down, and made our scripts very long, and it pissed off the production people. Because it's, okay, look, can't we just say, no, it's important that he lowers his head there, and it's important that he whispers it. All those things are important. And so we try to over-offer, and if at some point the director or the actor has another idea and wants to run with it and improve it, that's great. But you don't, it's the reverse of, say, a sitcom or even live action. Live action, the director and the actors want to, okay, we're going to have a fight in here. Let's choreograph it. Where, in our case, we're handing it to an artist, and so we're having to tell the artist, okay, these 3 people come in from here, this guy jumps through the door, this guy gets hit by the table, he's behind Ken. We have to show that so that the artist doesn't want to be handed, stage a fight with 9 bad guys. He will look at you and go crazy and say, what am I supposed to do? So, yes, there's much more detailing of our intention in animation writing we found than in live action writing. To the point of the scripts are twice as long.
So do you guys write better under pressure with a deadline? Because you've been through a bunch of different animation houses. I'm sure they have. So you write better under pressure?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, because there's a thing, an unfortunate thing that happens a lot of places in Hollywood, and that is you've got people in charge of making a decision. Like, is this a good X-Men story or a bad X-Men story? Is this, should we have this character in the story or this character? And until you make a decision, you haven't made a mistake. So if you've got an executive that keeps on telling you, well, try that again. I'm not sure if that's exactly what we were imagining. Try that again. Try that again. Give me script 12. Give me the 12th version of that scene. You just want to strangle them. I mean, after 3 or 4, you've given them everything you can think of for that scene. And you're just watching them. If they've got endless money and endless time, they can just keep on being indecisive forever because they haven't made a mistake yet. As soon as you say, that's the story we're going to tell. If it comes out badly, his boss says, well, why did you make that decision? So the executives in Hollywood tend to be indecisive and scared. And so if you're in a situation where we've got to get a script out every week, and we've got production people waiting to do it, I don't want to mull this over with you 15 times. Just give us your best script, boom, go to the next one. That makes us really happy. Because then there isn't all of this second guessing, third guessing, and fourth guessing. And just give us your best shot at that, and we'll see if it works. And if it doesn't, next time we'll hire somebody else.
And the hardest thing, I think, to do is stare at a blank piece of paper. I can write anything I want. And then, so now what? Because if you're writing a spec script or just writing something you want to write, you don't have someone breathing down your neck. You don't have genuine deadlines, which those can be hella good motivators. Because you can't, that train's left the station, and you just got to keep up with it.
So we got time for one more question, but I gotta say, you're gonna head back to your table.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have those books, you'll be signing them. How old are those books?
Okay. This came out, the newer one came out in October 2020.
Oh, nice.
So it's almost 2 years old.
And we thought we'd get to go on a road tour, but it was
But it was a COVID tour. And the other one's October 2017. So they're very recent.
Great. One more question, right down here. Once again, thanks for coming out and doing the first Q&A.
Our pleasure.
And here's our question right here.
Hi there. So for someone who isn't college educated, but they taught themselves how to screenwrite, what would be some tips? And again, thank you for some of the stuff you've already said, but are there any other tips that would help someone break into the business?
There is so much stuff available these days on the internet in a way that it wasn't when I was trying to figure things out. Even the Writers Guild of America West, libraries that have scripts that you can examine and look at and just see what that kind of script looks like for that show. I find that incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and try. There's lots and lots of advice and history from people in the business that's free on the web from various courses. Yeah, beware of, for $595, I'll teach you how to break into Hollywood, which 9 out of 10 of those things is just a scam. Really, what we tell people, first of all, you could be a third grade dropout. It doesn't matter if you write a good script, they'll buy it anyway. There's no sense of credentialism in Hollywood. That's a good thing because it means that there's not a barrier. You don't need some sort of certificate or degree. The bad thing is it means that 100 million people all have the same idea that you did, and they're all submitting scripts to the same person. But the general thing is we tell people, find stuff you love, write a version of it, which we call a spec or a script on speculation. If X-Men's your favorite show, write an X-Men script. You know the characters, you're not having to try to make up something perfect out of whole cloth. Write 2 or 3, 4 or 5, 6 or 7 different kinds of scripts to show your little range of your ability. Because the moment that I got an opportunity to work, if I had just thought, I really love movies, I've got some great ideas for writing for Hanna-Barbera, I wouldn't have had anything to show. my neighbor said, we need something short, something funny, something that, that kid appropriate. I had 15 scripts, 2 of them fit that, but I had stuff, if it had been a different company, I would have had stuff for them too. It's the equivalent of being an artist. Do the work, write stuff for yourself, no matter how bad you think it is, and you will have a portfolio to show to somebody that special hour when your neighbor comes by and says, I could get you work. Because that's always a case of, what does Hanna-Barbera need? What does Disney need? What does Marvel need from you? And if you got it, or something that hints to them, like you can get it to them, they'll pay you money to work for them.
Also, if you're on social media in any capacity, Twitter has a lot of crazy talented TV animation, TV writers, primetime writers, feature film writers, and a lot of them do a lot of tweeting about how you write a script, how you tell a story. So if you have people that you really like or people you admire, see if you can find them on Twitter, and just appreciate the pearls of wisdom they got out there.
And thank you for your pearls of wisdom. Give it up. Let's get a standing out for Eric and Julia Luo, the first Q&A. We'll be back at their table with their fantastic books. Oh, we're going to get a photo.
Hi, this is Aaron Ashmore, and you are watching Phantom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe like now. Oh, and have fun and follow your fandom.